What's up, YouTube? Today I got a special guest, Master Shaheed Muhammad. He's going to give us a little bit of Watts history of Black Los Angeles, just a little bit, but more so dealing with the gangs and martial arts.
Greetings, everyone. My name given to me when I was in Africa for a year is Shaheed, which means one who bears witness to truth. I was born and raised in a little town called Henderson, North Carolina, in which a little farming town, agricultural tobacco, that is, cotton, and which was a very industrial little town back in the day, which we had many black-owned businesses at that time. The hospital was all black, a drugstore was all black, schools all black, with everything you could think about. We were self-sufficient, and I left from that town eventually and went to the University of Pittsburgh, in which I had a self-design major in clinical social psychobiology because I started the martial arts when I was the age of 9 years old. We had an international missionary pastor to come in from Seoul, Korea, Master Chin, and he had a son that was 5 years of age who became my closest confidant. And they lived catty corner from my house, and I used to watch them practice every morning. So little Kim became my closest confidant. As I said, I was 9, he was 5, and he used to come and play with me and play with him because his dad trusted me. We was in the same church, and his father was a missionary minister there for a year and a half. And I used to watch him practice, as I said. And my grandfather was a scoutmaster, had the oldest scoutmaster troop at that time, Troop 101 in Henderson, which produced many great people, five-star generals, Colonel Jiggets, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Leatherster, and many other greats. And I grew up and had to go up to every scout meeting and had to know everything. We on field trips, hikes, camping. So I learned a lot of nature along with the martial arts at that time. So that going to Pittsburgh, I taught the martial arts at the Homewood Bushton YMCA, and I eventually went for a year of study at the University of Ile-Ife in Nigeria, and there I taught martial arts to the youth there at the campus and in the village. So I came back there, and then in 1972, 71, sorry, I moved from Pittsburgh. I left and moved to Los Angeles, and actually I was living on 85th Street off of May, just a little north of Manchester, one block north of Manchester. And it was 11. My mother had 11 of us, and she left when I was a year old from Henderson, and I was eager to get there to, mingle and intertwine with my fellow brothers and sisters. And there I was introduced to all of my siblings, and we grew up with a close knit family. And of course, one of them was Florence Griffith.
So, Florence is your sister,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and she's how much
Flo
younger than
Jo,
you?
they call it. 10 years to be exact. I was born in 1949. She was born in 1959.
Florence Griffith Joyner, better known as Flo Jo, was an American track and field athlete and the fastest woman ever recorded. She set the world record in 1988 for the 100 meters and 200 meters. During the late 1980s, she became a popular figure due to both her record setting athleticism and her electric personal style.
So I got a job after being there for several months. I met a lady named Norma Carroll, and she said, I have somebody, Dr. J.A. Cannon, looking for somebody to take over from the Institute, and we can't get anybody to take it over. A lot of people scared to go into there. I said, scared? Why? Because the gangs are taking it over. They're running the place. I said, that's great. We need somebody to run it. So I went to Dr. J.A. Cannon, who was the head of the psychiatric department at Dr. King Hospital there. So I took over that job as a director. And while I was there, I had a chance of meeting many of the beautiful brothers and sisters who were pretty much securing the place, what they were doing, really, because they saw the need. And a lot of people was afraid to go there to introduce themselves to their brothers and sisters. Of course, those brothers had an agenda, had an objective, and they formed a group called the Brothers Unlimited, which was funded by a couple of agencies, rather. And their objective was to curtail gang violence. There was Brother Harold Taiska, who I gave him the name of Mountain, the big brother. He was the leader of the Piru. And then there was Bobby Lavender, who was the leader of the Bishops. And we had various brothers from different sets that was there. And so by me coming in, they were a little leery of who I was, not from any particular set, but I had something to offer them. And Bruce Lee was a big icon back then. He was the most popular household word in America. Everybody loved Bruce. So by me having the knowledge of martial arts, that was the catalyst that galvanized us together. But my first student was a brother named Fred, who had his leg ran over on a train when he was 12 years old there in Watts, up there off 102nd at the train depot there. And Fred was my first student. And I used to teach him how to do jumping jacks on that one leg, ground fighting techniques, and all the other gang members sit there and watch. Say, hey, he can teach them. Maybe we can learn something. So they all started coming in. And eventually, we would I would train them, about 20 of them. There was a set of about 20 from all different sets. And man, them brothers loved it. I was able to take them on field trips to the mountains. We went to Big Bear Mountains for sleep-ins and hikes. We used to take the brothers. Sometimes we'd be waist high, chest high, deep in snow, going over the mountains. And I would tell them about the story of Hannibal and the Alps. And one of the brothers named himself Hannibal. And we would get to the top of this mountain. We see all these white folks sliding down on toboggans and sleds, zooming fast. So they said, wow, look at this. They had never seen it before. But at the top of the mountain was a little concession stand, and they had empty boxes stacked up. So the brother said, man, we can use these boxes. So they started going down the mountain in the boxes, and the snow and the ice caked up on the boxes. They were going faster than the boys on them stairs and toboggans. Do you know them guys left, those white boys left the mountain? They said, man, these guys, we conquered the mountain. So I said, you guys did what Hannibal did. Hannibal came up the side of the mountains with 10,000 elephants and conquered the side of Italy. So, man, so we talked about that story, went back to the cabin, had a good time. We would go to the beaches. And matter of fact, one thing that we did, I did a nature walk with 15 brothers and 15 sisters in Mafundi van. By the way, Mafundi was the first building built after the Watts riots. And it was one of the structures that was scientifically proven with Dr. Cannon, and it had a glass front around the bottom, was that if something that meant for the people, even though it was glass and stood for something, then they would take care of it, which was proven and it still stands today. However, I was there a couple of months ago and it has changed on it, unfortunately. But at one point in its heyday, by the way, the word Mafundi means craftsman in Swahili. It was founded by Ron Karinga and uh, uh, Mamaka, Baraka, who became one of the top poets in the country. Uh, his name was at one point Leroy Jones, who was a top poet. So they were the two founders of the Mafundi Culture Institute. Very prominent, and we had classes housed in there. Sometimes Eartha Kitt would come. She did dance classes. We had Sister Tyson would come and do drama classes. That's where Roger Mosley got his start. who became a pilot in Magnum PI in the helicopter in that series. Bless his soul, he has transitioned. Many professionals, Raymond St. Jock, the Silvers, matter of fact, musical group that started out of there. And I will have classes on the stage. Sometimes I have 100 students each class session. And I would have to jump off the stage and run and touch base with each student, make sure they were technically sound in the techniques, and jump back up on the stage. So that was the beginning of my larger means of instructing larger classes. Um, However, sometimes my assistants, uh, Taiska and Bobby, Harold that is, and Bobby became the name Mountain, would assist in my classes with so many.
Do you remember any of the names of the Pyrus that came to your classes?
Harold Taiska,
Okay.
he was the leader. He
And
lived, I think he lived on Piru Street to be exact.
do you remember what year you met him?
Yeah, at Mufunda. When I first came into Mufunda, he was the big guy. He was about 6'4", maybe about 250 pounds. He was there, one of the first ones that came in, was standing there in Mufunda. Him and Mountain, Bobby, and a few other guys, about 4 or 5 of them, Doobie. Um, I can't think of them all right now, but quite a few were standing there looking at me, sizing me up. When I came in, I didn't, I spoke to them cordially, gave them their respect every morning. They would come every morning, stand, do their thing, stand around. They would kind of stand off because they were sizing me up, man. I knew what they were doing.
Did you ever do any teachings at Luders Park?
At what park?
Luders Park in Compton?
No, but no. I did a demonstration at Bateman Auditorium, and I might have, but I know most of my teaching was done at Darby Park over there off of Crenshaw, behind the Coliseum. Darby, I taught all over LA and Compton, man.
Okay, now when you talked
See
about
what's
Bobby Lavender, you mentioned Bobby Lavender a couple of times. Did you train
yeah,
Bobby, and how about his brother, and the rest of his family?
Jimmy,
Mhm.
Jimmy, yes.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about what it was like training those two guys?
Well, um, starting with Bobby. Bobby was a very determined. He was a leader. He was a natural leader, and most of my students were leaders, as I said before. It was a brother. The group was called Brothers Unlimited, and many of the brothers were residuals, or shall I say, not, I hate to use the word underlings, but they were like lieutenants under them that came into my class. Yeah, they have several lieutenants that came into my class based on them being in my class. And Bobby set the standard of being a leader, and he tried to be very proficient in anything he did, anything I taught, he followed it to the T. Not only did he follow it to the T, he took it to another level. He became, his character was developed, his communication skills was developed. Um, and they studied themselves even more so. They studied other people and they became not reactionary. And the same with Jimmy. Jimmy was a very devout student as well for the most part. Um, so what I can say is that yes, yes. And again, they were the leader of the bishops, and my mother and my sisters, everybody lived at that time off of Beach Street. They moved from 85th Street over to Beach Street, which was a bishop neighborhood. And my younger brothers, they, they tied in with Bobby. And so there was a link, a tie in with my younger brothers and Bobby and Jimmy. You know, uh, Jimmy knew my sister, my youngest sister, Gay Gay. So, it's like a family affair. It was in the same neighborhood. We used to do demonstrations all over LA. would blow people's minds. We would do demonstrations in front of Jim Kelly at the Maverick Club there on Crenshaw and many other places, parks, matter of fact, at the Watts festival that we had, the Watts Health Fair Festival. And we would highlight, I have pictures today, we would highlight of the festivals, events. Shaka would put, oh man, I did it once, and that was the last time. He would put uh, fuses, that is, of firecrackers between his teeth, and just the tip of it, and the lit part on the outside, and they would go off. People would trip out, man. What in the world these guys made of? And Shaka would do some things, and breaking bricks with his head and hands, elbows, and because I was teaching them very principles, it's not about destroying each other. It's about creating your inner self. And matter of fact, by the way, I want to say that the reason I have shades on, I had an eye operation, a couple of eye operations just recently, so my sight is not here until another 3 or 4 weeks. So bear with me. I'm not just trying to be here to be like, hey man, it's that trying to be cool. No, it's the purpose. I have these shades on. But back to what I was saying, I was teaching them the principles really of what martial arts is. That number one, I would teach them their number one weapon is their mind to think things out first before you move. Number two weapon is your voice, how to communicate to one another before you act, and that your number one enemy is yourself. Take a checkup from the neck up before you leave the house. Check out. So I would teach them those principles, and we would reiterate those principles in our sessions. We did a lot of meditation to go inwardly. So I thank God that I was in a position to help these brothers to curtail. Matter of fact, it was a united, uh, not united front. For the lack of it, well, United Front was one of the sponsors of them. Um, and they're moving on to keep this organization going. Um, but Mafundi was sustained by model cities, which was a joke. They say, why is that a joke? Well, model cities was a temporary remedy, a temporary band-aid. Because I remember once when Mafundi was going under the axe, they was trying to shut it down, and many other Mexican programs that was very valuable and successful in their respective communities. So we went downtown. Tom Bradley was the mayor at that time, and got a call from our board chairman, Miss Doris Fuller, who was the chairman at that time, and of course Dr. J.A. Cannon as well. He said, I need you to get as many people as you can down to the chambers of City Hall downtown to support the validity and viability of Mafundi. So I said, yes, say no more. So I called some of the people in the community, and I went over to the Jordan Down projects, and I told Pee Wee, a brother who was the leader of the Crips there, little short brother, the first brother I seen, little short dogs, beautiful brother, spirit. He had two long earrings in both ears. So I said, Pee Wee, look, man, I could make 4, 5, 10 trips, whatever it takes, to go down to the city hall. He said, back then my name was Rasan. That's what people knew me as. And I named that myself. Also, I went by that name, interchanged it with Shaheed, because I enjoyed Rasan Golden Kirk's music. It was a jazz musician. However, um, I he said, okay, Rasan. He said, matter of fact, you don't have to come no more. He said, go ahead on. He said, take a few of the community ladies and people on down to City Hall. So I go down to City Hall. And at that time, as I was down in City Hall, I'm thinking, man, we got to beg these folks for something that we know is doing good. And I'm sitting there looking, we got to beg, you know, for something, they know it's good. Why is this not even necessary? So I go back outside in disgust. And when I go back outside, Man, there was a sea of brothers that Pee Wee had called out. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. I don't know how it happened. But I mean, I went outside. People said, "Come on, son, look who's out here, man. We got community support." I had to wade through tip over the brothers' legs and their feet to get through one end of the grounds and do a circle around and come back and just admire the community support that Pee Wee had with the Crips there. Man, like a sea of ants, of bodies. I said, man, that's some power. That was some power. So, nevertheless, um, but Funder did get the axe. They didn't put any more monies in it. So that was disheartening. But when Mufunda was in his heyday, it was very powerful. Matter of fact, there was a gentleman who was my assistant director, his name Ed Scott, who lived in Orange County. He would drive from Orange County on the other side of La Mirada. I can't think of it at this time, the little town he lived in, but he would drive back and forth every day and night, be on time. Ed Scott, beautiful brother, originally from Alabama. And, excuse me. And one night it was raining. And the next day, Ed Scott came. I said, "What happened to your car, Ed?" He said, "Man, the police stopped it, took the uh, baton and busted my lights and laughed at me and told me to get on home the best way I could." So we were abused pretty much. You know, I never had any complications pretty much with the police department. Um, but Ed and many of my other constituencies did have a few problems because they didn't want to see something viable going on in the community. Um, I lived on Angeles Vista at that time, and I had a pool in my backyard and a lemon tree. And on that lemon tree, I would use nunchucks. Back then, many of my students made homemade nunchucks with the mama's broomsticks, broom handles, everybody mop handles. They were breaking them off and putting chain in the middle with a nail attached. And the police automatically made it against the law because they were afraid to touch these brothers if they had nunchucks. So in LA, they made it unlawful to have nunchucks based on me teaching the brothers the art of nunchucks, which was a weapon that was used uh, for cultivating crops, rice, apples off trees, and fruit off trees. Now, I was uh, introduced on a TV show back in 1981 called That's Incredible, in which I was able to blindfold using nunchucks, taking the apple off of the young lady's, one of my students' head, blindfold, and taking the apple out of her teeth, blindfold, with nunchucks. Because at my lemon tree beside my pool, I used to go back there at nighttime and practice knocking them off, where I can control the field, the distance of them. And the weapon became an extension of my arm. So eventually, I moved on to use it with the sword. Matter of fact, I performed at President Obama's first inauguration event during a Saturday night when they had international events there. I performed that weekend using the sword, cutting the apple off the young lady's head out of her teeth, and then a cucumber in half out of her hand, and then a honeydew melon in half, which is like a cantaloupe, in half out of her hand. So I graduated to using a sword for President Obama's inauguration. So, however, I teach even today that the weapon, again, your weapon is your number one weapon is your mind. Your number two weapon is your voice, how and when to communicate. And your number one enemy is yourself. So these principles highlight the foundation and structure which I teach to students because a lot of times I ask students, what's your number one weapon? Oh, my hands. Oh, my feet. No, no, no. They have the martial arts all backwards. And by me living in this town here, moving back here, because I've opened up schools in Shreveport, Louisiana, Phoenix, Arizona, and I had 5 schools in Los Angeles. I promoted several events. First one was the Ebony Martial Arts Expo with Steve Sanders, who played in Bruce Lee's movies, who's Steve Muhammad now. It was at the Bateman Auditorium, which the Ebony Martial Arts Expo, the Malcolm X University, and many other martial arts schools here in LA um, came and performed and showed the different styles internationally. I performed at Las Vegas at the Sahara Hotel. Um, then from there, I promoted a show at Celebrity Theater in Phoenix, which had a revolving stage. I think it was the last location that Marvin Gaye performed before he was murdered by his father. It was a beautiful venue called the Celebrity Theater. It had a revolving stage, and there I had styles. It was called the world's first martial arts Olympics, and that was '84 because my sister, who became Flo Jo, is my sister who was a student of mine at Mufundi, and she and I were trained quite a bit. She, out of 11 of us, she was the most physically inclined one, and back again on 85th Street when it would rain, the steam would come up the street, out the street. We see the steam sizzling. We would take our shoes off and we would race, man. And I would beat them all. I was the fastest out of all of them. And she would look at me like, she had that defiant look, like I'm going to get you one day. Yeah, I said, okay, all right, yeah, right. And from a male chauvinistic perspective, I'm like, girl, you'll never beat me as long as you live. Well, we were in Tokyo, and Tokyo Dome to be exact, and we were preparing for an event that night. And she said, remember, I have it on video. She said, you remember when you said you could beat me? I said, yeah. And I'm like, uh-oh, is this going to be a showdown? So she said, yeah, we used to take our shoes off. And she was telling her business manager's wife, you did? She says, she started going through taking her shoes off. I said, oh, yeah. So in my mind, I'm thinking all the TV cameras were there. I said, I'm going to beat this girl. She had just taken the world's record in the Seoul Olympics. This was in 1989, a year after she had taken and set world records. And some of her records are still standing today. So I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna show this girl I'm still who I am. So the call was on the mark, get set, go. And man, I think I got off the block a little quicker than she did. And next thing I know, I felt a breeze and hair blowing in my face, and there she go, right by. So that let me know, young men and brothers, don't underestimate the power of a woman. Matter of fact, one of my first teachers, my second teacher, matter of fact, at the Pittsburgh Ishinru Academy on East Liberty was a woman, and she was very dynamic. Now, my first teacher in life was a woman, so never underestimate the power of a woman. So I thought I could beat her. Of course, she zoomed on by. I had all this on video footage. I captured that, and but